have about $34K in student loans myself.
You have exactly the average amount of student loans, in fact. We talk about everyone needs to make their payments. Well, they're not making it easy for people to make their payments.
Hello, welcome to the Rooted Roundtable. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Trump administration is now saying, okay, you have to repay your student loans. And so it's triggering the whole income-driven plan.
Right.
And I mean, we also are coming off of these 5 years, right, of bliss. Not quite bliss, but like bliss. We're all, I mean, I could make the payment, but what if I just don't, right? And everything was fine. But at this point, what happens, not even if you don't, but if you just can't repay your student loans?
Yeah. No, I mean, it is really bad right now. And you mentioned the income-driven payment plans, and those have been in complete flux because the Biden administration tried to implement a new plan that was going to be affordable, you know, and honestly, like, I didn't think it went far enough, right? It only protects 225% of the federal poverty level. Like, that's not that much, especially in a place like Boston.
Yeah.
And so it didn't go far enough, but then, you know, Republican Attorney General and about a dozen different states sued, blocked it. It's still blocked. Nobody has deemed it to be illegal, but you know, we're still waiting to see what happens, and it doesn't look like this administration's defending it. And so, meanwhile, people are trying to get into the other repayment plans, and there's a 2 million borrower backlog to get those processed.
Wow.
So, you know, we talk about everyone needs to make their payments. Well, they're not making it easy for people to make their payments. People can apply for these plans, and then they're going to get stuck in a forbearance that's not going to count towards public service loan forgiveness. It's not going to count towards cancellation under income-driven payment. And they're, you know, at their current pace, it's going to be years before some people actually get into the repayment plans to repay their bills.
Tony, do you have students who are in this situation where they can't repay their loans? Do you know students who are?
The question is how many are going to be coming forward in the next year or two. That's the real question. I mean, we have students every year who struggle to figure out like how much they can take on because of all the things that they use their loans for beyond paying for school, right? The amount of money they send home for medicine, for food, for lights. And so in many respects, they don't even worry about paying back the loan. They worry about paying down the present because so many of their absolute needs are pressing, right? The call you get at 7 a.m. and the call you get at 7 p.m. trumps any kind of worry about paying back a loan because you're so worried about, you know, giving your parents or your grandparents what they need. And that, to me, is what's also left out of the table is like what the actual cost of higher education and what's the price, right? And there's a big gap between the two. I've been fortunate enough to be at different institutions that are no loan schools where students are where the vast majority of students, even on the high financial aid, do not need to take a loan. And then other schools that you may qualify, but there's still a little bit of a gap that you actually do need to take out a loan. It's a scary thing because the vast majority of students do not go to schools that can afford to pay down all of their loans for them. Right, Harvard may have increased their no loan cap to $200,000. MIT may be at $200,000. But honestly, if you get outside of the 10 or 15 wealthiest schools, those programs are non-existent in that same way, let alone increasing it to that number. So it's going to be even more students who are going to be dealing with that kind of shortfall. Personally, I'm also interested in seeing what our philanthropies going to do, especially like the Gates Foundation, Jack Kent Cooke, Coca-Cola scholars, and hopefully, if anything, we can get rid of the quote-unquote last dollar scholarship clause in many of these things.
What is that?
A last dollar scholarship clause that says that whatever school you go to, if you win a fellowship from this person or this organization, we will cover whatever are the last dollars owed by you after they determine your financial aid. But let's say you go to a school where they pay 98%. That student could still literally possibly go homeless or hungry for part of their time because if it's not in their financial aid bill, that scholarship can't give you money for it. And when you're in a school in Boston, if you're in a school in San Francisco, in New York, in Florida, because even everywhere is getting more and more expensive, the cost of living doesn't necessarily get factored into those things in the exact same way. And so there's a whole host of things that I'm trying to figure out.
And that happens too. Like, I remember being a high school student and filling out the FAFSA, right? And so it goes by income level, your household income level, but it doesn't document all those other things that are happening in your household world that may prohibit you from being able to pay for college. And LaToya, do you see families that you work with in Wayland public schools kind of struggling with making college decisions because of that?
I do. One of the parents I was having a conversation with recently was basically in tears because her daughter was now removing sort of her options for school based on financial aid and lack thereof.
And this was recently?
She's a current, she's a current senior. And then too, with her mom's her income as well as her ability to even qualify for a private loan, or the fact that she doesn't qualify for most private loans. The daughter was reconsidering college and thinking about going into the service, so she could try to get money that way. And it was just a blow to her mom to just try to think that, you know, she did all this work. Again, as a part of METCO, that's a lifelong commitment. That's a family obligation and commitment that you are making that trip every day, all those years, you know. And to think that you did that so your child could have a better education, have the opportunity to attend these schools, and now thinking about how they're not able to do that. And it's just beyond your control.
Do y'all think that kind of hearing that story and knowing what's going on now changes the way that people are thinking about college in general? Like, whether maybe they just feel like it's not even worth it anymore.
I mean, I think student debt in general has done that for a lot of people. You know, I think we hear story after story about people who you graduate. I mean, hopefully they graduate, right? Like, actually, 40% of student loan borrowers don't have a degree.
Right.
And for those folks, they took out the debt and they don't even get that benefit of the degree. But for folks,
they still have to pay back.
But they still have to pay it. Still have to pay it back. And you know, but a lot of folks are. I think that's why you saw a lot of the kind of movement building during COVID, before even the Biden administration, but certainly during the Biden administration for cancellation, because a lot of people are wondering, why am I buried? I was told I worked my entire life to get to this degree, and now I'm just buried and I can't get out from under it. And you know, I mean, the really sad piece is that the fastest growing population of student loan borrowers is older borrowers, people over 50, and you know, who can't even retire at this point.
And are these people who are wanting to go to school later in life, or just people who have had to wait so long to be able to pay their loans back?
Well, I think there's a number of different pieces of it. It's some folks who have still been paying on their loans since the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and then it is people who took out loans for their kids or for their grandkids, right? Because it's not enough to just have, you know, the student take it on themselves. It's not covering the cost of attendance at so many places.
And prior to these changes, I can just think about, as you're saying that, of parents who've taken on the debt for their children who are struggling with that. With these upcoming changes, it sounds like with the repayment options, or some of it could be then garnishing not just the students' wages, but their parents. And in some cases, that's their parents' Social Security, which, I mean, it already seemed like there was a decline for the same reason that you just discussed about, you know, is it even worth it, right? Are they going to be able to graduate? If they do graduate, are they able to land a job to then be able to start paying these loans off? And now with all these changes, the question has come up. And I know for me, I've seen the trend of fewer and fewer students thinking that college is the way to go. They are thinking of trade schools. They are thinking of licensure. They are thinking of voc tech schools instead of the traditional, you know, college preparatory high school, which is the one that I work at. But a lot of that, I think, has to do with this idea of being buried under either loan or just debt in general once you finish, and being penalized if you don't. Right.
And the thing is, I think we should also say that it's not pushing necessarily a 4-year residential experience is all that we're talking about here, because licensure programs, trade schools should be part of the conversation when it comes to post-secondary education, right? There's actual research that looks at how licensure actually increases mobility, because have a license means you also don't have a criminal record in many instances, right? And so there's a lot of positive things that go along with that particular mobility. But we're also but in saying that, I don't want a resegregation of higher education, because that's what's happening here. Affirmative action being decided with students with fair admissions versus Harvard and North Carolina basically is starting that us down that path, right? Because now more selective schools are limited in who they can get in. To me, this repealing and almost reneging of a promise of access to higher education by limiting Pell, putting caps on graduate student loans, knowing that medical school and law school and business school and professional schools in general, even nursing, social work are getting very, very expensive, and we need those professions to thrive. We're putting caps on that for people who can borrow. We are not doing enough to make it easier, or rather even practical, for people to pursue higher education. And then even if you are part of that select few who are capable of going to those schools that say, hey, money will no longer be a barrier to entry, now those schools have to pick classes in a much more circumscribed way, right? And so we actually may see, in good ways, an increase in the number of people who are pursuing different trades. But what I fear is that those people who are going to be doing that route are going to be disproportionately from minoritized groups, disproportionately from lower income families, whereas everyone else gets to still choose which school they want to go to, as if they're window shopping.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've talked about is the fair admissions case came down on the day before the debt cancellation case. And I thought that the juxtaposition of those two cases right next to each other was really poignant, because it's like, first of all, how dare you try to get an education?
Right.
And if you do, let me punish you on the back end, right? It's the front end and the back end of that conversation of who is entitled to go to higher education. I think that is also my fear too, that like trades are obviously critically important.
Right.
Although many people still take on student debt to do these trades, right?
Exactly.
So like,
because it also depends on how much they're going to be making once they
right.
start working in it.
right, and
how
so
quickly
many
they're able to
people have to take on student debt. You know, I was talking just a couple weeks ago with truck drivers who have student debt, both because either they went to school and they're one of the 40% where it didn't work out, and so then they changed careers, or because you need to get your CDL and you need to take out a loan to get that commercial driver's license.
Yeah, so we know that, I mean, after all, they are loans. They do have to be repaid in some form or capacity, but is there any silver lining here? What is the good news that we can leave folks with?
I mean, now, right? I'm like, it's not about the loans necessarily, but I think, like you said, I don't think it's a bad place to be that now there has been this sort of increased conversation about trade schools and getting licensure. I have students, there are programs now where you can do that even in high school, which is amazing. But I think the struggle comes in with the lack of choice.
Yeah.
Right. So I've always had students who are interested in the trades and who would go that route, but students now feeling like they have no choice.
Well, LaToya Rivers, Tony Jack, and Persis, this has been a wonderful conversation, and thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.